All right. It's been a while since I've done this. I kind of forget how to. God of War Ragnarok, it's been out for about a week. I finished the game last Saturday, I want to say. And since then, I've just been kind of cleaning things up, doing a lot of post-game stuff and looking around, tying up loose ends, hunting down Odin's, Ravens, stuff like that. I have like 10 of those left to get. Still got to find some poems and other collectibles, and I'm on my way to platinuming the game. And I thought I'd go ahead and sit down and we'd review it. Now, if you've been on the channel for a while, then you know that I have historically been anti God of War 2018. I had a lot of problems with that game. I overall didn't think it was that good. Um, and I don't really know what I expected out of playing this one. You could call it FOMO. You know, I didn't want to be the guy that didn't play God of War Ragnarok. It's the biggest PlayStation game of the year. That being said, it's the same year that Gran Turismo 7 and Horizon Forbidden West came out, and I'm confident in saying that God of War Ragnarok is the biggest PlayStation game of 2022. But you'll be pleased to know that I will not be tearing into God of War Ragnarok the way that I did in my 30-minute teardown of God of War 2018. Because, surprise, surprise, spoiler alert, I actually really loved this game. Now, I do have problems with it, and we'll get to those, but overall, I'm letting you know right now, I thought this was a great game. Um, and since I enjoyed it overall, I think what I want to do first is get the negative stuff out of the way so that I can spend the majority of the video praising the game. That being said, this will be a mildly spoilery type video. I know the game's been out for a good while, but for a lot of folks that haven't played it yet or are watching people play it or whatever, there's a lot of YouTubers playing the game that haven't finished it yet. So I don't want to just spoil a bunch of things for you. The story, the main events, the twists, all that stuff, all the post-game, end-game stuff, all of that is being saved for another video where I'll discuss the ending of the game and what comes next for the series, but none of that is the point of today's video. The only reason we're getting into spoilers at all is because in order to properly talk about and break down and digest the exploration and combat and puzzle solving mechanics of the game, I have to mention something that happens around the 60% mark through the story. It's kind of unavoidable because it creates a lot of unintended consequences for playing the game. So, that being said, this is your last chance because I'm going to go ahead and get right into what that is, and we're going to move on. You get a third weapon in the game. You have your Blades of Chaos, you have your Leviathan Axe, and you have your Draupnir Spear, which is a great weapon. It's super cool. You know, Kratos is a Spartan, so it's nice to have a Spartan weapon. And I waited until after I had done all of the bosses, the mini-bosses, the optional bosses, all the fights, all that stuff, even those ones, because I wanted to make sure that I had a level 9 axe, level 9 blades, level 9 spear, fully upgraded, all that stuff, so that I could properly talk about the combat. I want to do that first. There have been changes made to the way that the combat works, in that you can hold triangle with the X and frost it up and do special moves with it. You can do the same by spamming triangle with the Blades of Chaos, blaze them up, do whatever. Can't really do that with the spear though, and it's really annoying. And what that ends up creating is a bit of a dissonance, a thing that you have to adjust to, because in the last game, say you throw your axe at something to open a door or to keep a door open, you go through, you start using the Blades of Chaos to fight something, you could always press triangle to recall the axe, and you would switch right back to it immediately. I tried to do that easily a dozen times in this game, but I just started spinning my Blade of Chaos and charging it up with fire. So that's a bit of a nuisance. In order to switch back to the axe, you have to actually switch back to the axe, and then he'll automatically call it back. That's not a huge deal, but it did create a little bit of an issue for me. Also, quick turn is not really something that I used a lot in the last game, but it's something that I desperately wanted to use more in this game, but it's complicated. Because in the last game, you could just press down on the D-pad and quick turn. Now, You press down on the D-pad, you switch to your drop near spear. Are you seeing the problem? Now to quick turn, you hold L1 and then press down on the D-pad. But in doing so, I would accidentally quick turn because I'm trying to switch to my drop near spear, which is on down on the D-pad, press L1 and then do a runic attack. If I'm fighting a boss like, spoilers again, I guess, but a Valkyrie or one of the Berserkers, my thing is I want to pop all 6 of my runic attacks right at the beginning. And maybe this is my fault because maybe you're not supposed to be doing it like that, but I like to do that to get a nice little bit of damage, and then I can use my relic, and I can have whoever my support character is do whatever they do. It's a good way to get a good head start on the fight. But sometimes I'll be trying to switch to the spear to do those runic attacks, and I'll accidentally quick turn. Another thing, the game doesn't exactly teach you everything, and it even teaches you things that aren't precisely correct, because this game is very similar to Elden Ring, in a way that a lot of the bosses or a lot of the enemies can be really quick or really big, or they'll move a lot, and in being locked onto them, it can happen that they either move completely out of frame and you lose your lock on and have to find them again, or it yanks your camera in a way where you can't quite tell exactly what's going on anymore, because the lock-on system wasn't prepared for the enemy in question to move around so much. That's not a huge deal, though. Obviously, it didn't get in the way of me completing the game. None of my issues with the game stopped me from wanting to play it or got in the way of me having a good time. I want that to be understood right now. I'm not saying that these issues that I have with the game, which could be skill issues, I don't know. None of that kept me from enjoying the game. None of that is really going to bring my score of the game down when we get to that point. It's still a fine game, okay? And the last issue that I have... Oh, there's another thing. You can use certain arrow types from your support characters to solve puzzles. There's a lot of new ways to solve puzzles now, with traversal methods and all that stuff. But there's a particular arrow that you get where if you shoot a certain spot on a thing multiple times, the area of effect gets bigger. And that can really simplify things when you're trying to create a chain reaction from one end of something to the other. But the game doesn't tell you that. I just kind of found that out by accident, but it's whatever. But speaking of support characters, and this is something that I imagine a lot of people are going to mention, something that really gets on my nerves is when I walk into a room and Mimir or Freya or Atreus, whoever it is, immediately starts talking about, oh, there's a thing over there. There's a staircase on that side of the wall. Try throwing your axe at this target. Maybe you can ignite this with your blades. Try swinging over there. It's like, I just got here, you know? Let me at least try and solve the puzzle by myself. Sometimes I need more than 30 seconds. Maybe sometimes I need 5 minutes, you know? Some puzzles are pretty intricate. But I want to figure it out myself, you know? And that gets to be annoying. And one last little pet peeve that I have with the combat in this game. I want to tell you right now that if you want to succeed with the combat, the first thing that you need to learn is parry timing, because that'll get you very far. However, if your parrying isn't point perfect, and let's say you get hit with an attack that does, you know, frost, it starts slowing you down. Kratos starts moving slower, and it gets in the way of being able to do other defensive things, because what I do like about this game is that you can cancel out of certain animations. If you're doing a runic attack, obviously not. But if you're doing a regular attack and a parryable move comes in towards you, you can cancel and you can parry. But it prevents you from being able to do that if you get frosted, and that's really annoying. I get that if you're going to go with a parry-heavy combat style like I did, there's going to be punishment for messing that up. But sometimes it feels like you're very severely punished for one mistake, because then, depending on what you're fighting, you can just get comboed to death because you can't do anything to defend yourself. You're moving too slow. Anyway, all that out of the way, I do want to end on this note. Trying to critique a game like this when it comes to combat or anything like that feels like an impossible task, because there are people who are of the mindset that a game like God of War or a From Software game, or any game that's designed to be difficult, anything that you have as an issue or a pet peeve, any gripe or criticism that you have against these games is automatically reduced to a skill issue. You're clearly not good enough at the game. The game is designed flawlessly. You're the problem. And a lot of the times I'm willing to admit, yeah, I am the problem. I'm not that good at the game. But it's also possible that the game has some flaws in its design that, so if your plan was to counter any of those past arguments with, that's a you problem, I really don't want to hear it. Because I'm not going to be replying to any of those comments, honestly. Anyway. Now that we've gotten all the negative stuff out of the way, let's spend the rest of this video talking about positive stuff, right? First thing, the game looks and sounds gorgeous. It looks so good, and the music, the sound design, the sound effects, it's all perfect. I love it. Especially the song that plays during the final credits. Goodness. This game also moved me emotionally a lot more than I thought it would. I didn't think that the first game for me to cry while playing in years since Spider-Man 2018 would be God of War. But hey, that's where we're at. A lot of work is done in building out every single member of the cast in this game. Every character, Odin, Thor, Kratos, I almost said Baldur, he's dead, Mimir, Atreus, Freya's brother, every character that you meet has their own arc. They all have something for you to learn about them. They all have a bit of closure at certain points in the story, and it all comes together so beautifully. Kratos has obviously softened in between the last game and this one. His relationship with Atreus is stronger. It's not perfect, but it is stronger. They're more transparent with each other. They speak more plainly, not always, but for the most part, they are open and honest with each other. And the only glimpses of what you see in the last game of them butting heads is when they're both being very stubborn about wanting to solve certain problems in their own ways, and that kind of makes sense, right? Because one thing that I didn't like about the last game is that the issues between Kratos and Atreus are basically solved in one conversation, and I thought that was really cheap and really easy. But in this game, every character has plenty of time spent on them, and that includes Atreus, that includes Kratos. You learn so much about the intricacies of their relationship, and things build out in an organic way, and the time that is needed for these arcs to play out is the time that is taken. And when the issue between Kratos and Atreus is solved, it feels much more organic and much more earned. And that's really important to me. And it's something that I was really hoping that they would fix in this game, and I got what I wanted there. I can't really complain. Another thing is that even with the villains in this game, the enemies, the perceived bad guys, they are personified and characterized in a way that makes them sympathetic, and it makes you understand them in a way that we didn't get in the last game, and we really didn't get in God of War, because in the original God of War series, the gods that you're killing are kind of just cartoon characters. They're archetypes, and yes, that is carried over into this new Norse saga, but it's not as flat, right? You look at the old games, Ares isn't really much of a character. Neither is Hades. Hephaestus gets some time, Pandora gets time, Zeus gets a bit. Athena's really the one that you spend the most time with and you learn the most about. Heracles, kind of flat. But in this particular game, Thor, Sif, Heimdall, everybody gets enough time for you to understand them. And I really appreciate that. Because God of War Ragnarok shows true maturity in the franchise in a way that God of War 2018 claims to. That whole game is about, oh, I won't have the boy know of my past because then it will repeat the cycle. It's like, well, you're forcing the cycle to repeat. You know, people claim Kratos to be this more well-rounded, three-dimensional, in-depth character in God of War 2018, but he's closed himself off in that game. He shows more emotions in the first God of War. He shows a wider range of emotions, rather, in the first God of War, and especially in Chains of Olympus, than you see in God of War 2018. So I really do feel like a lot of people that make those claims about Kratos in 2018 just didn't play the old games, especially the PSP ones. Because Ghost of Sparta, Chains of Olympus, you see Kratos in a very different light than you see in the original trilogy. But that's neither here nor there. Another thing that I really enjoyed is that, we'll do one last spoiler, I guess. You play as different characters. You play as Kratos and you play as Atreus. And that does a lot for building out the enemies in this game. Because the thing with doing a no-cut camera, this one-take camera, is that the focal character, being Kratos, has to be in every single scene. And that's something that also comes with first-person perspective books. And I can appreciate that sometimes, but when you have an enemy like Baldur, who's come from a different land, like Asgard, to find something specific, like Faye, you don't get to learn about any of that stuff unless Kratos is in the room. You know, you don't learn that Faye is a giant until the very end of the game, and that's very effective. However, if we were able to cut to scenes of Thor and Odin and Baldur, or cut to other things, we can start dropping little hints, right? And yeah, you do get a hint with, I thought you'd be bigger. Because, you know, Baldur was looking for a giant and he got Kratos. But that's really it, you know? And you don't really learn anything about Baldur specifically until you all end up in hell and you find out that Freya is his mother and that she cursed him. You spend so much more time with Freya than you do with Baldur, but in this game, you get to spend time with Thor and spend time with Odin. You learn their motives, you learn their personalities, you learn why characters do certain things, you know? Thor isn't malicious. You don't want him to die. You get to see Odin's cunning and his manipulation skills, all that stuff. It's so good. It's so much better here to be able to switch perspectives like that. I love it. Very creative. Very well executed. Also, the enemy and boss variety in this game is chef's kiss compared to the last game, because goodness gracious, you fight so many trolls with a rock and so many ancients, and there are a couple of those guys in this game too, but then there's dragons, and there's Dreki, and there's berserkers, and there's elves, and there's all these other things that you get to fight. I think that there are over a dozen unique bosses in this game, which is such a relief. Such a relief. Maybe even more than that. Especially the ones that are considered to be mandatory, but there are so many more that you find just randomly in exploration, and it's so good. There's so many mechanics to the combat. It's so nice. Every boss fight feels like a more unique experience. I don't see another Dreki or another Berserker or another whatever and go, ugh, one of these guys, you know? I do have that reaction to seeing ancients and trolls in this game, but it got to be so much worse last time because you fight maybe like a dozen of each of those guys, and it's only 2 different ones. It's really annoying, but I greatly appreciated being able to use so many different techniques and ideas and strategies against so many different enemies. And another thing, the last game, color-coded enemies, right? You can't use your Frost Axe against frozen enemies. It'll bounce off. Not in this game. Yes, you do more damage using the Blades of Chaos against a frozen enemy and the Leviathan Axe against a fire enemy, but there are things that make it different where you can still deal damage and you can build up frost on an enemy, and then you switch to the blades and you get to do bonus damage because the heat plus a frost enemy extra damage. And you know, if the blades were to bounce off of a fire enemy, that wouldn't really work. So they definitely learned from that as well. That was very relieving. What more can really be said about that? Oh yeah, exploration and puzzle solving. There are so many new ways to solve puzzles and so many different ways to think, like, oh, I'll use sound arrows on this or sigil arrows on that and connect this to that, and I'll light this from here and I'll throw my axe here and it'll bounce around to go to that and it'll cut that. or I'll throw my spear into here and I'll swing from there. It's so cool. It's so in depth, and it's so fun to figure out how to use your different tools and and solve the puzzle, solve the problem. And that being said, when you're going through the game initially, before you get the spear that you can use, you see cracks in walls, and you see like holes in the walls that are shooting out wind, and it's like, I don't have the item that I need for that, which means that I'm gonna get it later, and I'll get to come back and do this. It's a lot more Metroidvania than the last game was, and I really enjoy that. There are elements of that last time because it's like, oh, there's sap on this wall that I can't break yet. But in this one, I don't know, it just opens the door for so much more creative problem solving, because in the last one it really just comes down to, oh, I'll just burn this, or I'll just freeze that, or I'll just have Atreus shoot it. It's all very simple last time, but this time around things are more complicated, things are more interesting, things are more in depth, and I do appreciate that. I'm struggling to find really. Oh yeah, the length of the game. God of War 2018, I think I can beat in like 10 hours. It took me, and you can look on the channel, you can look at the Twitch. It took me about 25 hours to beat this game, and that's really nice. And that's with doing some, extracurricular activities along the way. I'm sure if you were to just rush through the game, it would be closer to like 18 to 20 hours, but I don't really care, because the game presents itself in a way where you want to continue to explore certain things before you move on, or at least I did, right? I also want to call attention to Brock and Sindri. They were kind of minor characters in the last one, but they are big figures in the plot of this game, and they crush it. They are great in this game. Ooh, I'm so sorry. The RPGification of God of War was a bit of a nuisance to me last time, but this time I really enjoyed it. It's like, oh, I can build this armor set, I can build these stats out this way. I don't know why that would change for me between the last game and this one. Maybe it's just because I enjoyed everything else in this one so much more than the last one, but that's an equation that I don't have the answer for right now. But with all those things combined, with story and plot and characterization, oh, the performances too. The performances from Christopher Judge and Sonny Suljic are so good. Sonny, I hope Sonny gets the Best Performance Award at the Game Awards next month, because his work as Atreus is the rock upon which this game is built. Atreus lays the foundation for this game in such an important and relevant way. Now, this is something about the Norse saga that I do think is a bit of a detriment to that end of what I just said about Atreus. It kind of reduces Kratos' agency in the Norse saga, because in the Greek saga, from Ascension all the way to God of War 3, Kratos has a reason to be furious with the Greek gods. They're the ones that lied to him, cursed him, betrayed him, manipulated him, used him as a weapon, all that stuff, tortured him, whatever. It's satisfying watching him get revenge for what happened. In the Norse saga, Kratos has no connection with these gods beyond the ones that are invented for the story by placing Atreus in the position of being Loki. Which works for the story in this game, but it felt tacked on in the last one. It felt like a later decision. And yeah, he can talk to animals and stuff, but that's just a giant thing. He could be half giant without being Loki. And with Faye, right? Faye being a giant. The only reason that Kratos fights any of the Norse gods is because of a path that his wife set him on. And the reason that he continues to fight Norse gods is because of the consequences from his actions while being on the path that his wife set him on. It feels like Kratos is being puppeteered by a character who you never even see or hear in the last game, and only appears as flashbacks in this one. Some people might not see it that way, they might not think about it that way, but I think it robs Kratos of a very important aspect of a protagonist, and that is agency. And it can be said that no character has agency in any fictional story because it's all predetermined by the writers, whatever. I don't care. Kratos not having a personal reason to go after certain gods except for like, oh, well, they could hurt my kid. It's just like, I don't know. It's not as satisfying watching Kratos beat on Odin as it was to watch him beat on Zeus, if that makes any sense. Fighting Thor, while fun and exciting because he's a cool fight, it's not like you don't, I don't know, you're not wishing for carnage against Thor. And I praised that aspect earlier because Thor is a good guy. But Thor could be a good guy and have understandable motives and whatever else, and you could still build a personal relationship between Kratos and Thor that demands that the two of them fight. I don't know. It's maybe that it's not a flaw with the game, right? I'm not gonna bring down the score because of that. It's just something that I thought about. But I've talked about everything I really wanted to talk about, so I guess it is time to give you the score. I would say that God of War Ragnarok is an easy 9 out of 10. It's not a perfect game, but it's damn good. And I recommend it to anybody who owns a PS5, even a PS4. It's definitely built for PS5, but if you can't get your hands on one, you gotta play the game somehow, right? That being said, have you played God of War Ragnarok? If you have, then we're gonna talk about something real quick, and if you haven't, you can stop watching the video. Leave a like, comment below, whatever. At the beginning of the game, when you first fight Thor, he says, "This feels familiar." It alludes to a time travel thing, but that actually doesn't end up happening. What does happen is that you find out that Faye and Thor fought each other way back in the past. Is that what that was referencing? Does it feel familiar because he's fought somebody that used that axe? Food for thought. Anyway, I'll catch you later.